Glad to see you here. I'm gonna make this quick. I just wanted to note that this was wonderfully written by someone very close to me. While I didn't witness these exact events myself, I can attest to their plausibility. I had a couple of very odd experiences happen to me in a previous home. So with that being said, grab a hot drink, settle in like always, and let's get into it. It was early fall. I drove south down the highway and turned onto Ashwick Road, just as the railroad crossing guards dropped to allow a northbound train to pass. The locomotive eased into the town, alerting passers-by to its arrival with a long, mournful whistle. I took this pause in my journey to assess my surroundings. Golden fields and wooden electrical poles with clear blue and green glass insulators bordered the train tracks. A faint scent hung in the air, an odd mixture of figs and paint. Beside the railroad tracks, a potato processing plant belched steam into the still, cool afternoon, permeating its surroundings with the smell of fries. Once the train docked beside a row of metal silos, the crossing arms lifted, and I ambled over the tracks, east toward Ashwick. With a small population of less than 100, Ashwick, Idaho is a community of eccentric neighbors who either surprisingly get along or expectedly don't. Regardless of varying ages, walks of life, or political views, it has been my experience that the moral values of Ashwick overshadow any differences. For instance, my neighbors across the street gave us a truckload of roadbed soil when ground squirrels permeated our leach field, and another neighbor left toilet paper on our doorstep when the pandemic instilled an irrational fear of having to wipe with twigs and leaves. Elderly couples in Ashwick brought knitted trivets and canned jams, while the flashier newcomers from California blessed us with home-cooked meals when we were sick with the flu. This communal attentiveness and bearing one another's burdens likely made it difficult for the long-standing Ashwick residents when the Sutterfields moved out of their old farmhouse, and we moved in. The Sutterfields built this farmhouse in 1933, and the home was occupied by the family, and only the family, until 2019, when I purchased it. The Sutterfields were revered as pioneering homesteaders before Ashwick was even annexed to its neighboring town. As with any new home, it took time before we became accustomed to the usual creaks and groans of the old farmhouse. There was much work to be done, but we loved the property once we set eyes on it. The house sits on nearly an acre, with mature trees, apple, cedar, ornamental plum, lilacs, rose bushes, and hollyhocks. At the back of the property, an old milk barn stands, and beside it the lean-to built of weathered wood and corrugated tin. The house itself has 3 bedrooms, a bath, eat-in kitchen, and a modest living room with a wood stove and corner windows. But for all its quaint detail and serene setting, something appears to have, for a lack of a better word, lingered. It started the first night we spent in the farmhouse. Our sleep was fitful, as could be expected when sleeping on the living room floor amongst cleaning supplies and moving boxes. Around 1 a.m, I awoke suddenly to an unexpected noise. Squinting through the darkness and into the kitchen, I tried to focus my eyes on where I believed the sound originated. Then I heard it again. Distinct footsteps ascending the wooden stairs leading up from the basement. The footfalls were heavy, as though this uninvited guest wore work boots. I immediately threw off the covers and crept into the kitchen to have a better view of the basement entryway. The hallway was dark and quiet, and the door leading to the basement was wide open. I waited, expecting to see someone step across the threshold, but no one emerged. I dismissed the footsteps as being another unfamiliar sound in an old home, and returned to my sleeping bag on the living room floor. The rest of the night was uneventful, so I didn't mention the footsteps to Lena, who's a logical thinker. I doubted she would have thought it unusual anyway. I hardly gave it a second thought, until a few nights later, when I was again awakened at an odd hour. After spending the day painting, repositioning furniture, and tending the grounds, Lena and I were exhausted. She was fast asleep, but I decided to read an inspiring memoir about backcountry travel in remote Alaska. I had read several chapters before my head grew weary, and I switched off the headlamp to sleep. I can't be certain how many hours passed before I found myself wincing at a bright light shining directly in my face. Annoyed rather than frightened, I abruptly sat up in my sleeping bag to confront whatever was causing this disruption. A beam of pale yellow light filtered through the lacy curtains of the living room corner window. Then, without a sound, it went completely dark. I grabbed a firearm from a bag on the floor beside me and ran out the back door to the side of the house. The night sky was moonless, a sea of velvety blackness peppered with twinkling starlight. A small security light affixed to the church across the street lit my path as I navigated away through head-high hollyhocks and across the lawn to the living room window. But much like the basement stairwell from the other night, no one emerged from the shadows. No vehicle drove down the empty road beside my house. Not even the barn owl could be heard calling from his perch in the pines next door. It was dead still. Then I heard a gurgling, a rattle, and a wicked hiss from the ground at my feet. I nearly shot my foot off before realizing the automatic sprinklers had just kicked on. I quickly trotted back across the yard to escape the spraying water. Once inside, I locked the door behind me and burrowed deep inside my sleeping bag. Whether from damp pajamas or the fact I had no explanation for what caused the strange light, I shuddered involuntarily. Once my body warmed up and a good deal of time passed without any noises or lights, I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I shared my strange experience with Lena. She was at the cook stove stirring a small pot of steel-cut oats. She tapped the wooden spoon on the side of the pot and placed it on the counter. "Funny you should mention that," she said as she dropped a handful of dried cranberries into the pot. "I had something weird happen last night when I was getting ready for bed." Lena went on to describe her nightly routine of face washing and toothbrushing. She said she stepped out of the bathroom briefly, and when she returned, she discovered the rat-tail comb she'd left on the sink was missing. She checked in and around the vanity. It went through all the drawers, but the comb was nowhere to be found. This reminded me of the missing toothpaste incident. "Maybe whatever took your comb took my toothpaste," I said. "I've had 2 full tubes go missing. I thought I was losing my mind." "Well, could it be a pack rat? One that cares about whitening its teeth?" "Not likely." As of the date of us writing, we still haven't found the comb, and 2 more tubes of toothpaste have gone missing. When winter fell on eastern Idaho, the strange activity in the farmhouse intensified, or so it appeared. It may have been because we were more aware, being present in the home frequently as snowstorms and harsh winds ravaged the countryside. On a cold and stark night, everyone had gone to bed, but I was awake, writing a program for work the next day. As I sat in the quiet living room with a fire flickering and popping in the wood stove, I started to notice shadows in the kitchen. However, when I would instinctively look up from my work, I'd see an empty kitchen softly lit by the stove light. I returned my attention to the laptop long enough to become deeply immersed in my work. Sometime later, another shadow moved across the kitchen floor. I knew my mother, who only sleeps in little quips throughout the day, would likely be awake at this odd hour, and suddenly feeling inexplicably cold and restless, I wanted to share what I was seeing with someone who'd understand. I texted, I'm seeing some crazy movement in my kitchen. I sent it. Like what? She replied. Shadows. What kind of shadows? Like someone is walking between the sink and the stove. I offered to try and photograph what I was witnessing to provide some sort of context. The shadows were not forms, but rather movement in front of a light. I raised my phone to snap a picture, just as a white light shot out of the kitchen and into the living room. I audibly gasped, not expecting to capture anything more than an empty kitchen. I immediately examined the photo, but little more was shown than a white, translucent smudge. As I began texting my mother to attach the photo with an explanation, I saw another shadow, this time seated in the overstuffed chair in the corner of my living room. What appeared to be the shape of a man stood up from the chair and moved briskly, fluidly, across the room to the wood stove, before disappearing. I sat there for a moment, realizing that I was holding my breath, not out of fear, but amazement. Did I really just see that? Strangely, I didn't feel threatened. My mind cycled through several possibilities for what I had just experienced, but I arrived at no satisfactory conclusion. The most plausible, yet undeniably far-reaching answer was that my quaint vintage farmhouse was haunted. A few days passed and the house rested, seemingly appeased. It wasn't until my sister visited that the activity began to glow like the embers of a wind-fed fire. My sister, we'll call her Beck, flew in from Arizona to stay for the weekend. We spent time driving through the countryside, dining at our favorite old town restaurants, and talking over cups of coffee about the strange nature of the Ashwick farmhouse. My sister's response to the unexplained is to rebuke everything, just to be sure, but I didn't get the impression that the odd goings-on derived from the demonic. It was as though I were watching an overlay of the house's history on present day, or so I thought. My opinion swiftly changed when the lingering occupants began interacting not just visually, but physically. It started with my cat, Saint Nicholas of Cyprus, or Nick for short, is my adopted, attitude-ridden black cat, one of 4 rescues. A middle-aged woman with 4 cats and a small dog. I should probably get my affairs in order. On the last night of my sister's visit, I had to coach a class at my CrossFit affiliate. I left her with a bottle of red wine and Nick for company. I told her that class was only for an hour, and I'd be home right after. She seemed content in the recliner, with a plush throw across her lap and a glass of vino in hand. I grabbed my keys off the hook and headed out the back door. The sun was setting as I walked across the graveled drive to my truck. The sky was brushed with a soft purplish hue, and the underside of cirrus clouds were touched with golden sunlight. It would be dark soon, but my mind was on nothing more than the class I was about to coach, and the quickest route to make the 15-mile drive to my CrossFit affiliate. I certainly wasn't thinking about whether I had foolishly left my sister alone in a haunted farmhouse. When I pulled into the gym parking lot, several athletes were already waiting. I unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, and began turning on display monitors when my cell phone rang. It was Beck. "Hey, are you all right? I'm just about to start class." "There is something in the bedroom where I'm sleeping," she responded. What do you mean?" "I can see shadows moving under the door." She sounded tense, speaking as though she didn't want to alert this thing that she was aware of its presence. I looked at the clock. I needed to start class. "Well, it could be a car driving by. Maybe the headlights are..." "It's not a car. I can see it standing there," she said quickly. I sighed. It wasn't that I didn't believe her, but there was nothing I could do at that moment. I didn't want her scared and alone. Okay, just keep the bedroom door closed. Everything's going to be fine. I'll be home as soon as I can.
Nick sees it too,
she said.
I'm going to film it and send the video to you.
And with that, our call was disconnected. For the next hour, I got my small class through their workout. When we were in our stretching and cool-down phase, I took the opportunity to check my phone to see whether my sister had sent the video. Sure enough, there was a 12-second clip in our text exchange. I watched as my sister approached the bedroom door. Her breathing was audible. She crept slowly, but with deliberation. Light from the bedside lamp shone beneath the door jamb, illuminating Nick as he poised like a loaded spring, curious, but ready to strike. Without a doubt, I could make out movement in the bedroom. In the video, Beck whispered, asking if I could see what she was seeing, further bolstering the credibility of her observation by directing my attention to Nick's behavior. "Hey, is everything okay?" one of the athletes asked. I think so. My sister's staying at my house. I left her with a bottle of wine to relax, but now she seems to be concerned about something. I wasn't sure if I was ready to tell anyone outside of family what we had going on in Ashwick. Concerned about what? Well, she thinks she's seeing someone in the spare bedroom. What, do you need to call the police? Another athlete inquired. No, I don't believe so. Some think our farmhouse is haunted. This was uncomfortable. Oh, what makes you say that? Well, okay. My sister, she said she's seeing shadows moving back and forth in the light beneath the bedroom door. Maybe it's the bottle of wine. There was a round of laughter at that moment, but in defense of my sister, I began sharing some other experiences. To my surprise, the class seemed sympathetic and encouraged me to get home and make sure Beck was safe. When I got home, Beck was doing better than expected. The bottle of wine was empty, so I opened another one and we reviewed the video again. Even after checking every inch of the guest bedroom, Beck was reluctant to sleep in there. I couldn't blame her. This wasn't the first time she had stayed with me and suffered frightful sleepless nights due to some mischievous spectral visitor. In fact, this was the third home in which something similar had occurred. A comment my niece once made comes to mind. They say there were no haunted places, just haunted people. But she's still young. What could she possibly know? Over the next couple of months, Lena and I continued to see shadows and hear footsteps, but it was with such frequency that it became a run-of-the-mill, as seeing deer in the yard or hearing a train whistle. But then the disembodied voices. Full-on conversations began to occur. The first time I heard it, the voice was distinctly female, and she spoke with an air of sophistication and prudence. Now, how I came to that conclusion is a mystery to me, since I couldn't discern a single word she said. Perhaps it was something in her tone. It was early winter. The temperatures had dropped to the teens overnight, and the farmer's almanac predicted less snow but much colder weather for this season. I was sitting at the kitchen table watching the day's dying light fading in the west. I mindlessly dunked a tea bag in my cup of boiling water and longed for that first dusting of snow predicted by the end of the week. The first snow made the Ashwick countryside seem so pristine. The trees, fields, and foothills seemed to be refreshed, like the old milk barn after Lena had added a bright white coat of paint to it. But for now, it was a spitting sleet that pelted the snow, and I knew it wouldn't stick. I removed the tea bag from my cup and added a spoonful of honey. Lena was snapping twigs she'd pruned from the apple tree to create a kindling bundle for the wood stove. The smell of applewood is sweet, and a welcome change to the winter's damp, almost metallic cold air when I heard the fire crackle to life and the cats had ventured closer to nap in its heat. I joined Lena in the living room to watch a British mystery. We weren't far into our mystery when I began to hear what I thought was extraneous dialogue between two of the characters. When I heard it again, I reached for the remote and paused the movie. "Do you hear that?" I asked Lena. She listened. Then the woman's voice began again. "Is there someone at the back door?" she asked. I set the remote down and went to check. Night had fallen when I peered through the storm door window. I switched on the back porch light and searched for a visitor, but the property was empty and quiet. I hesitated for a moment and listened. No visitors, no voices, but a wisp of cigarette smoke lofted up from the basement. I clicked on the basement light to the top of the stairs to see whether some source of the smoke could be detected. Nothing. With a sense of dubiety, I switched off the light and returned to the living room. "Well?" Lena asked. "There's no one there," I replied, moving a cat to the side so I could settle back into my chair. "Probably just the wind," Lena said mockingly. It seemed all skeptics dismissed inexplicable phenomena as wind, or weather balloons. I was just about to take another sip of my tea when the woman's voice arose from the back of the house, louder this time. "That's coming from the service porch," I said, unable to draw a logical conclusion. Lena shrugged and offered, "It's Sunday night. Maybe she just wants to finish the washing for the work week ahead." The female voice continued, and on rare occasion we heard what sounded like a man respond. The voices became commonplace with the lights, shadows, and footsteps. Startling but harmless. That is, until these unseen occupants began to overstep respectable boundaries. The first perceived intrusion happened late at night, not long after the voices began. I was sound asleep, lying on my side facing the door to the bathroom that adjoins my bedroom, when suddenly I awoke. I don't know if it was a dream or a sound that caused my abrupt awakening, but whatever the cause, I wasn't alarmed. My eyes flew open, but I hardly moved. As I lay there, facing the bathroom door, I was fixated on the small gap where the door had been left ajar. Soft light pooled into the bedroom from a nightlight I had plugged in above the sink. Suddenly, the door shimmied a little and began to open slowly, allowing more light to enter the bedroom. I lifted my head from the pillow to better focus on the ever-widening gap when it abruptly stopped. Then the figure of a woman appeared in the doorway. She walked into the bedroom, directly past my bed, and through the wall to the outside. I threw the covers off so quickly that Nick tumbled to the other side of the bed. I pushed open the bathroom door and inspected everything. The linen closet, behind the shower curtain, behind the door and out into the hallway. The relative silence of my home felt suffocating. I was somewhat relieved when the rhythmic tick-tock of the wall clock surfaced through the silence. Its familiar sound was like an anchor to the things I knew and understood. I couldn't go back to sleep. Not now. I ventured into the kitchen and clicked on the coffee pot. I needed to leave for work in a couple of hours. I felt it was best to leave early and let the rest of the household sleep in the ignorant bliss. I had several classes to teach that day. My first was early morning and my last had me driving home after dark. When I got home, Lena was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a salad. A football game was playing on the television, and all the cats and Lola, the pit bull corgi mix, were asleep beside the fire. Again. "You were up early this morning," Lena said. "I had something very strange happen last night," I told her, then proceeded to relay my story of the woman walking into the bedroom. Lena set 2 plates on the kitchen table, along with a bowl of colorful mixed salad. I have to tell you something." Her voice sounded serious, and coming on the tail end of my story, I wondered if she had experienced something even more disturbing. I was standing at the kitchen counter when I felt something touch my neck. She seated herself at the table and used the tongs to heap a serving of salad onto her plate. I thought it was a loose hair, so I brushed at the side of my neck and went about my business. Then it happened again, only this time it moved up and down my neck. What was it?" I asked. I don't know. I thought it might be a spider, but when I looked in the bathroom mirror, there was nothing there. I even took off my shirt to see if there was something crawling on it." Convinced that whatever had touched her neck was gone, Lena said she returned to the kitchen to prepare dinner. As I'm standing there, it happens a third time. It felt like someone's fingers were gently rubbing up and down the side of my neck. Lena was visibly upset by this. She wasn't one to feel intimidated by anything that might be classified as paranormal, but this touching was beyond the pale. I even shouted, "Please stop," and it did. It hasn't happened again. Not yet, anyway. I considered the progression of phenomena, from simple lights and sounds to physical contact. I wondered if this was the pinnacle of activity, and that maybe everything would stop, or become more aggressive. It did neither. Instead, the activity appeared to regress, then change. Peculiar incidents continued to occur in Ashwick, but I love my old farmhouse. I enjoy my mornings at the back of the property, rocking in the porch swing while sipping coffee. I love the smell of wood smoke in the fall and the lilacs in the spring. I feel such a sense of calm when watching the birds dip and flutter in the irrigation water, and when the deer migrate from the mountains to feed on the plum seedlings and raspberries. If I'm still and quiet, they'll bed down beneath my bedroom window. It's home. And when I die, perhaps I'll be a lingering resident too.